Hey, welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast. This podcast exists to inspire advisors like you to increase your profitability and the quality of your life, but not just for yourself, also for those that you serve. This week, we're going to ask you a question, just to consider a question, which is, do you make your own decisions? Now, you might be a little offended by that question, but in reality, you don't make many of your own decisions. Or if you do, you made a decision a long time ago, and then you just keep making the same decision by default. Where did your default choices come from, though? From you, from your parents, from your company, from the guy you happened to get a desk next to 15 years ago? Well, this week, we're going to explore how our default decisions guide and often misguide us as leaders. So here's Wes and Justin.
Well, hey, it is great to be with everybody today. Today on this podcast, you'll notice someone missing and someone that's been missing that's back. And so Andy's not on today's recording, and Justin is decided to make his appearance back in the podcasting world. Justin, where have you been? I heard you got locked up. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I can't really talk about it. It's a sensitive topic, and it may or may not have had something to do with what I used to do. More on the may not side than may have, but...
Is that the reason Andy's not here today? Did you do something to Andy?
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll let Andy talk about it when he comes back. But yeah, no need to adjust your audio or your video. Yeah, I'm back. Just been a crazy busy season, exciting time, but excited to be back and jump back into some more of these.
Fantastic. Well, I love this topic, Justin, that we're going to be diving into. The whole series is kind of built around these random thoughts on leadership that we didn't really have a cohesive thought thinking around the cadence of these, but they're just really good. And we run into them regularly, and we thought, let's just do one on random thoughts on leadership that have been useful to us that we're bumping into. And one we're going to talk about today is super specific because it's super relevant. And it has to, we're calling it default settings because Justin just got a new computer, and he's getting to experience that if you've ever, had your computer for a long time, and maybe it was an earlier version of things, and you either inherited those settings that came with, you've adopted them and muscle memory around them. And then you eventually, maybe you customize things here and there and got it to be yours the way you wanted it. And then you get a new one. And then what happens is it comes with a whole different set of default settings. So your mouse doesn't scroll the same way. The way the buttons are sometimes in different spots, depending on the kind of model and makeup that you have. And so Justin has been dealing with this all morning, where he has now been given a whole new set of default settings. And our tendency, I think, and where we'll go with it, and Justin, I'll let you comment on this in a second, is all of us operate not just with our computers and our devices, and we'll kind of have some fun with that today, but in life and in business with default settings. And sometimes those default settings we decided, we chose them. We said, hey, this is a powerful way forward. But like anything, as time goes by, those things may not best suit where we want to go next. And unless we are constantly aware of what our default settings are and are willing to change them, we may end up suffering unnecessarily. Also on the same side is many of us inherited default settings. We never even decided them at all. Whether that was, how we were raised, or the business that we grew up in, or the frame of mind that we were given when we were growing up in that business, and technology that we use, whatever it is. And if we don't take the time to actually embrace the change sometimes to the default, what's going to happen is we'll be beautifully prepared to handle a world that no longer exists because things change. And the default settings we have need to change along with them. So Justin, I'll stop for a second and just let you speak into that a little bit.
Yeah, like you said, it's real timely. The new computer has been a bittersweet transition. And it's funny because, I've been putting it off for a while now, like continuing to run into issues.
Yeah.
My one, just being maxed out from a capacity technologically, right? And taking so much extra time and challenges, but like essentially defending keeping that old computer because I didn't want to switch.
Oh my gosh. So this has been an ongoing, and finally, what was it last week when I was like, Justin, we have Cheryl order you a new computer right now. Because you defended I can just keep fixing it. And if I don't have the app on my computer, it doesn't take up enough memory and crash. And I'm like, that's so inefficient. You're struggling unnecessarily. Get a new computer. Come on.
Yeah, but it's funny because that was the new routine, and like not wanting to have to change mid-stroke. Like it's so easy to defend that out of like fear or concern about having to all the things that you have to change. But the reality is it's not even that bad. Like yes, when I went to turn on Zoom, I couldn't hear anything and I had to go in and readjust all my audio settings. All my passwords that I don't remember because they're saved in keychains, I have to go in and re-enter all those and do all that process. The reality is what's also funny is there are things from a technology standpoint that I've been operating without, but by them forcing me to like reset up my new account under the new operating system and everything else, like all of a sudden I've got access to new capabilities, even with the email stuff that I didn't have when I was operating on the other system. So it's bittersweet. And we were talking about this before. Like recently I had like a fraud alert on my credit card. And all of a sudden I get the email, it shuts off my credit card. First thing I think about is A, how dare somebody try to do that to me? And then B was more of the like, oh, now great, I got to go change all of my automatic drafts and everything else and call everybody. Yeah. But on the flip side, like my wife's like, well, they just stopped us from like all these fraudulent charges and somebody stealing our identity. I'm like, well, touche. Like it's kind of a good point. Like,
yes, but I was inconvenienced temporarily. So
yeah, but it's so easy to just again to be frustrated with the challenge of the change. And even though something turned into like a great routine, like it may not always, be good forever, or like it's gotta like what got you here is there. We talked about that before, or you were talking about some stuff even in racing that I thought was pretty interesting that I never would have thought of.
Oh yeah. So I remember, I used to race motocross and still follow the sport and loved it. But back in the day, I remember there was an older racer at the time. I think he was almost 40, and he's racing with a bunch of 20-year-olds, and because you do age out of that sport most of the time. But Doug Henry, I don't know, he might have been 35, but he was really old for that sport at that time. And Doug Henry was not the fastest guy by any means on the track, but he was crafty, and he would think different than the way everybody else thought. And, there was an outdoor race. I'll never forget it. And they're all running this race, and he's close enough to the front, but there's no way he's not going to win. Cause he's got like 10 people that are in front of him, and there's like 2 turns to go. And this outdoor course was real rutted. So it was kind of loamy sand that eventually you'd get these deep grooves that like half the wheel would sink down into. And it was the fastest route at the beginning of the race. There was no doubt, but it got deeper and deeper, and everybody just for whatever reason continued to stay in the rut that they were in. And because to get out of the rut meant almost certainly you're going to dump over and fall, because you had like these grooves and ruts going around the corner, except on these 2 last corners of the race, there was almost a vertical, like the berm that you cornered around kind of sloped up, and it was all rutted except for the very top, which was a almost vertical shelf. And Doug Henry on those last 2 corners, instead of slowing way down like everybody did and tried to not fall over in the rut and go around it, he pinned it and just literally went vertical, horizontal him on that vertical wall all the way around it, and passed 5 people in the first turn and 5 people in the second turn, and ended up winning the race. And I say that because the thing in life and the thing in our business is there are games we're playing to do what we do. There are ruts we're following. There are patterns that we engage in. And there are games that exist that nobody else even thinks to play, like Doug Henry did that day, because it was not burned into his mind that I have to do what everybody else is doing. I have to do what I've always done. Because you know what? For the first 25 minutes of that race, he played those same ruts just like everybody else, except for the 2 times he decided, what if I just did it a little different? What if I went outside of my comfort zone, outside of the normal? And it ultimately led him to the result that he was seeking most. And I think when we think about this from an advisor standpoint, this is a podcast for financial advisors, I think I see this show up in a variety of different ways. One is simply the thing we talk about all the time is if you don't have like a regular scheduled environments to challenge your normal with new, and by challenge your normal with new, we always talk about the 4 areas because you need all 4 if you're actually gonna make new things. And one is you have to have the cultivation, which is like when people are listening to this podcast right now. They're hopefully cultivating new ideas about how they're approaching their work and how they're approaching their business. So you got to have cultivation. A lot of people don't take the time to do this. They don't listen to a podcast. They don't read a book. They don't go to workshops or classes or things like that. And so then you have to have a resolution. And so this requires more activity because not only do you cultivate new ideas, but resolution first requires you to have a parking lot that those ideas live. Because we've all listened to an idea and heard a book and thought, yeah, I'll do that. Never wrote it down, never put it on a list. And as a result, it just kind of fell off into the distance. Instead, if you've got a parking lot of ideas, like right now, you and I were talking about this morning for quarter 2 or for quarter 3, we're having a very big focused quarter 2. And so there's a lot of things that I want to work on the business, but I just need to put my head down for the next 2 weeks, week and a half now and work in the business. But I'm still seeing good ideas. I'm getting challenged new ideas and I'm putting those on our parking lot for quarter 3. These may be initiatives we want to do. Now, ultimately what's going to happen is I've got to be resolute. I have to make a decision. A resolution is a decision to do or not to do something. And so I need to decide as a team, I'm going to give you guys my best cut of those. And as a team, we're all going to look at those and we're going to iterate on those. And we're going to decide which 4 or 5 or however many, depending on the amount of it, that we're actually going to move to then the orchestration phase, which is, okay, then how are we going to put these on the calendar? Because if they're new ideas, they're not yet on your calendar, right? If it's a new way of doing things, you have to calendar. You have to mark those down on your calendar of how are you going to make this new thing that's not muscle memory, that's not the rut. How are you going to schedule it in your day to where it becomes a part of your default assumptions? And then, of course, the last one, Justin, is we all have to have execution. And execution is really about regularly checking in to say, how do we do this week? We said we were going to do it. This is the new idea. Did we do what we said we were going to do to try and make it a part of our normal or our default? Or did we just run through the day with the default settings that we decided many years ago or inherited many years ago? So I think in advisor world, and as you're listening as advisors, listen, mid-year is upon us. By the time you're listening to this, maybe depending on when you listen, it's a couple of weeks in. It's a perfect time for you to stop and say, what is my default settings about this business? How am I approaching things right now? And what's in my parking lot of things that may challenge my default settings or update my default settings or even delete some of those old default settings since they're no longer serving me with where I'd like to end up. Thoughts on any of that, Justin?
Yeah, I just think it's key. And I hope that all of you are listening today caught that of the discussion of building in a natural rhythm. And I love the analogy of the motocross racing because this business is like a motocross race. Like there are periods where you may be going less fast versus faster, but you're never fully stopped, right? Like it's never like you're in the lap, but you've done a lap. You should have some takeaways and things that you're processing. And there are some straightaways in there where you've got an opportunity to like make some adjustments. Now, sometimes you're in that turn and you've got the throttle pinned back and you're horizontal. It's hard to make some big adjustments while you're doing it. Yeah. You're going to come out of that turn and you can make an assessment of like, how'd that work out? Well, that worked pretty good. I'm going to try it this next turn.
That's right.
Or like, hey, that rut has been slowing me down. I need to recognize that and then make an adjustment. And for us, I know like end of year or beginning of the year ends up being a good time. And I know that's a natural flow. Then also, like you mentioned, Q3, just the natural timing of how things land in the financial world. I think it's just critical of being intentional about the business rhythm instead of just being constantly reactionary and constantly thinking like new business. Like new business comes and it's part of it and it's an important part. But again, there's got to be times where you're like, because of the natural flow of just life, to where you're going to be a little less busy and use that opportunity to just schedule it in to actually focus on the business and how are you going to do things, or what's working and what's not. And then,
yeah,
I know some of the other things that we want to talk about was, looking at the takeaways for that new book study that we've been doing, that Unreasonable Hospitality. What did you want to kick off with that?
Yeah. I think what we'll do, because of time, is I want to wrap that in to next week's podcast, because it's such a big topic. And it certainly is a big part of what we're talking about here, because this book, Unreasonable Hospitality, is an incredible book. If you've not read it, check it out, because it helps you think differently. So I would put that on your parking lot of things that next quarter, maybe you do that as a team study. That's a good one. I'd also put on there, hey, right now we're taking we're signing people up for the next Transform class that kicks off in Q3. So if you want to get out of your rut, if you want to challenge your thinking and some of the fee-based, holistic financial planning things that we do on a regular basis, that's not been a part of your default, we would love to see you there. In fact, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, you can go back and listen to that one, because it really does help kind of give you a look and insight into some of the things that Transform's all about. So stay with us. We're going to continue on this idea of random thoughts on leadership. Today's was default settings. And we're going to carry this over into next week.
Well, hey, thanks for listening to today's show. I want to encourage you to get out of your default settings. One of the best ways you can do that is by taking Transform University. To learn more about the program, you can go to wesyounglive.com. Thanks.